One of the common aspects of great movies is that they tend to offer up something new for audiences on repeat viewings, recontextualizing what they saw the first time around in ways clever, hilarious, and sometimes even disturbing. You can find nods in the opening that impact later on in the movie, of certain characters giving telltale signs of their upcoming actions, and of course, you can find a ton of in-jokes before they're even relevant. However, sometimes a repeat viewing can unearth something a bit less enjoyable, as these 10 movies manage to take often light-hearted and enjoyable romps and make them much, much darker. Maybe sometimes ignorance is indeed bliss, right? Well, with this in mind, I'm Jules, this is Whatculture.com, and these are 10 movies way freakier than you thought. Number 10. Truman's wife is basically a porn actress. The Truman Show. Despite its slick veneer, The Truman Show is an ultimately tragic, achingly human film about a man breaking free from the constrained, artificial environment that he was born into. Now, Truman is of course the subject of the titular 24/7 reality TV show, whereby every aspect of his entire existence has been carefully curated. From the brand name products in his cupboard to even his wife Meryl being an actress by the name of Hannah Gill. No relation there. And it's this last point that provides some truly strange thoughts, as in order to keep up the facade of marriage, Truman and his air quotes wife must have had a fairly decent sex life. In fact, the director of the show says that he's determined that television's first on-air conception will still take place. Now, while I'm not here in any way to cast shade over sex workers, the audition for this otherwise wholesome role does take a dark turn, especially when a baby was apparently also part of the deal. Number 9. Beetlejuice tries to marry a teenage girl. Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice is one of Tim Burton's most entertainingly freewheeling movies, topped by a deliciously enjoyable performance from Michael Keaton as the demented poltergeist hired to scare a suburban family out of their haunted new home. And yet, if you scratch the surface, there is a really creepy moment in the fact that Beetlejuice only agrees to help Lydia if she marries him, which would allow Beetlejuice to cause havoc in the real world. Now, in the cinema, this is played off as a silly side plot, but lest we not forget, Lydia is a teenager, making this completely illegal and decidedly less funny as a result. Apparently, it was this scene that was the reason why Beetlejuice as a character has changed so much in later depictions to become more wacky and slapstick, because the IP holders wanted as little to do with the quasi-pedo angle as possible. Probably a smart choice. Number 8. Susan's life is totally ruined. Big. Big is one of Tom Hanks' most beloved movies, in which he plays Josh Baskin, a 12-year-old boy who manages to wish himself into the body of his older adult self. And while this is for the most part a laugh riot, there's one huge issue that's kind of glossed over. I'm of course talking about the romance between Josh and the adult Susan Lawrence, which from Susan's perspective is an entirely normal, healthy relationship with an age-appropriate man. But at the end of the film, Susan learns the truth, that she's effectively been having sex with a man who possesses the mind of a 12-year-old boy. Now, Susan is obviously totally blameless in this, but in the final moments of the film, it is made very clear that she's been pretty traumatized by the entire escapade. And she'd look insane if she told anyone, and even if she did, would she then be punished for it? It's played off for laughs in the film, but it's also something that probably destroyed her, and that bittersweet farewell that they share is definitely more bitter on her side. Number 7. It makes a love story out of sexual assault. Blade Runner 2049. Blade Runner 2049 is one of the greatest films of the last decade, beautiful and brilliantly poignant in places. However, it's also unavoidably saddled with the baggage of being a sequel to a film which harbored some rather problematic sexual politics. Now, despite being widely acclaimed as one of the best sci-fi films, and say it with me kids, of all time, Ridley Scott's original remains controversial for the scene in which Deckard forces himself upon replicant Rachel, which, depending on your reading, is either rape or at the very best coercion. Now, in the context of the first film's self-contained story, this is entirely in line with Deckard's established character and attitude towards replicants, but Blade Runner 2049 makes an eyebrow-raising attempt to reframe this relationship as an entirely loving one, even resulting in the birth of their daughter. However, one need only rewatch the original to see that this is not the case. Now, that's not to say that Rachel didn't eventually fall in love with Deckard, but here, it's anything but loving. Number 6. Lucy's amnesiac pregnancy. 50 First Dates. On the surface, 50 First Dates is a sweet rom-com starring Adam Sandler as Henry Roth, a man attempting to court Lucy Whitmore, an amnesiac who is unable to create new memories since a car accident a year prior. So the bulk of this movie is focused on Henry's efforts to navigate this major romantic hurdle, eventually deciding to play Lucy a videotape every morning which brings her up to speed on what's happened in her life since the accident. At the end of the film, the tape reveals that the two are now married, and after leaving her room, Lucy learns that they also have a young daughter. It's a sweet ending, right? Well, imagine waking up every morning to find yourself in a strange place and only a VHS and a pregnant belly for company. The emotional trauma that she goes through each and every day would be enormous. But it's easy to overlook as the film tries to play it off like a happy moment. But once you notice it, it's pretty dark. Number 5. The heroes kill tons of innocent people. The Matrix. The Matrix is unquestionably one of the most badass action movies ever made, but it's also worth taking a step back to consider the epic human cost of the hero's attempt to save the human race from the constraints of the Matrix. And this is no better evidence than in the film's iconic lobby shootout, where Neo and Trinity slaughter a fleet of security guards and soldiers, all of whom are actual people plugged into the Matrix. Now, given that dying in the Matrix also kills you in real life, there's no getting around the body count that Neo and company rack up, and they try to hand-wave this away by saying that if you're under the Matrix's spell, then you're pretty much considered an enemy, but it's still a bit rich to have your Jesus allegory shooting all the people that he's also telling us that he's trying to save. And do you need to kill them so painfully? I get that you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs, but do you need to spit on the eggs as well while you're doing it? Number 4. The toys see everything. Toy Story. By the time that Toy Story 3 rolls around, Andy is a 17-year-old male, and his toys see everything. And he has a computer in his room. I don't think I need to say anything more here. Number 3. Forrest's success was the result of abuse. Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump is a wonderful movie and boasts an incredibly charming story centering around Forrest's achievements in life. But it's also fair to say that the more glowing aspects of Forrest's picturesque story are only allowed to happen due to one specific and rather disturbing incident during his childhood. The course of Forrest's life is changed when he's allowed to go to public school despite not fitting the IQ requirements, this being the result of Mrs. Gump agreeing to have sex with the school's principal in exchange for a place. As hilarious as young Forrest's impression of the principal's impassioned grunting is, it really only conceals that this man thoroughly abused his power in order to get what he wanted from a desperate woman. When viewed today, it's a painful primer for many of the formative events in Forrest's life, namely meeting Jenny, shedding his braces and becoming an athlete, and every fortuitous future interaction that he was blessed with. In actual fact, Forrest and Jenny are actually two sides of the same coin. Forrest benefited enormously from his mother's sacrifice, while Jenny's troubled adulthood and self-destructive interest also seemed to have stemmed from the physical abuse that she suffered at the hands of her father. Number 2. Valkyrie is an unapologetic slave trader. Thor Ragnarok. Thor Ragnarok is a ludicrously entertaining MCU joint, which, among other things, first introduced audiences to the character of Valkyrie, a former warrior who has since become the Grandmaster slave trader on Sakaar. This basically amounts to Valkyrie capturing innocent people and serving them up for the Grandmaster's gladiatorial arena, where they'll presumably be torn asunder by the Hulk. And while she develops into a firm ally and turns in a brilliant comic performance, let's not forget that she is indeed, at the end of the day, a slave trader. It's likely that she's caused hundreds, if not thousands of deaths across her time, and she doesn't seem particularly repentant about it either. Sure, she's a PTSD-riddled alcoholic after the rest of the Valkyries were wiped out, but even so, is that any excuse for being a trash human being? Luckily, Taika Waititi is such a brilliantly talented filmmaker that within one scene we've forgotten about this rather grim day job and are engaging in the pure brilliance that is the rest of this film. And number 1, Lewis commits rape by deception. Revenge of the Nerds. Revenge of the Nerds is one of the most iconic comedies of the 1980s, yet it's also one that unveils a rather disconcerting undercurrent if revisited today. The mostly hilarious film features a troubling sequence in which the protagonist Lewis dons a Darth Vader outfit belonging to the jock douchebag Stan and promptly uses it to have sex with Stan's girlfriend Betty. Now, to be clear, Betty is completely unaware of this trick, yet after Lewis reveals his true identity, his rape by deception is entirely downplayed played because apparently Betty appeared to have enjoyed it. Yikes indeed. To make matters even more problematic, Betty becomes Lewis's wife and mother to his children later in this series, meaning that their entire relationship began in this manner. It's probably not a story to tell the kids when they ask how you met, right? Seriously though, this is a criminal offense.